Lesson 82, graphing the sine and cosine functions. Okay, there's a certain type of function that's called a periodic function. So we're going to learn what that is first. It is a function that repeats at regular intervals. So it makes sense that trig functions would be periodic because I don't know if you remember, but the unit circle, you can always just keep going around and around and around. So every 2 pi, then everything's going to repeat again. Repeat again, repeat again. So to graph it, it's going to look like a periodic function. It's just going to be a repeated graph that just keeps going and going. So a cycle of a periodic function is the shortest repeating part. So it kind of reminds me of when you have a repeating decimal, you want to put the very first part that repeats, and that's what you put the vinculum over. You don't like write a whole bunch. Anyway, the shortest part that repeats is called the cycle. And the period is the length of the cycle. I never thought of this before. Don't worry about it. It is a girl thing. Okay.
That's when you're learning now.
Yes, it is. Okay.
Oh, that's so funny.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the sine function. Okay. First I'll show you what it looks like, and then we'll talk about it, using the unit circle part. Okay. So we label the x-axis with pi. I did pi halves, pi, 3 pi halves, and 2 pi. So crosses here, goes up to 1, down to -1.
Ken, I got it, and I'm not even helping.
Now the amplitude is half the distance between the highest and lowest points. So if you notice, the highest point is at 1, the lowest point is at -1. So the amplitude is half, of 2. So it's just 1. What I do is I just look how far away from 0 is it on both sides. And that's the amplitude. So it's 1 lower and 1 above. Now if you have a unit circle, I closed my book, but on the unit circle, the sign is 0 at 0 at pi, and then again at 2 pi. So remember, sine is the y value, and y is 0 on the x-axis. So it will be 0 at 0 and 2 pi, and then at pi on the other side of the circle. So this is like your unit circle, and then at pi halves, sine is equal to 1, and at 3 pi halves, you'll notice that sine is -1. And then it kind of goes in between there. So to do the cosine of x, make that 1, -1, again go by pi halves, pi, 3 pi halves, and 2 pi. So cosine is 0 at pi halves, and at 3 pi halves. It equals 1 at 0 and at 2 pi, and it equals -1 at pi. So the cosine is going to have It's going to kind of look like this. So you can change the amplitude, the cycle, the period. You could change all of that by changing these variables a and b. So if you had y equals a sine bx, the amplitude, and remember that is half the distance from the the highest point to the lowest point, is the absolute value of a. So if you have a -3 right here, then it's going to go up to 3 and down to -3. The number of cycles from 0 to 2 pi is b. So if you have a number in here, then your whole function can get smaller, closer together, or further apart. So for instance, if I had sine 2x, I'm going to have 2 of these cycles between 0 and 2 pi. That means I'm going to have to come up, cross through pi halves, down, go back, and then go again. Okay, that's if b equals 2. So b just tells you how many cycles fits in there between 0 and 2 pi. And then the period is 2 pi divided by b. So again, if the b was a 2, then the sine function, you would get one whole cycle between 0 and pi, because 2 pi divided by 2 is just pi. So your whole, that cycle would fit there into pi. Okay, so there's patterns for sine and cosine. So we're going to kind of go over the pattern. If you notice, for sine, we started 0, then we went up to the max, we went down to 0, we went to the min, then we went to 0. And for cosine, we went max, 0, min, 0, max. So that's the cycle if a is greater than 0. So it changes if a is less than 0. So the pattern for sine, if a is greater than 0, it's going to start at 0, go up to the max, cross through 0, go down to the min, and then go back to 0. If a is less than 0, it will be a reflection in the x-axis. So it'll start with 0, it'll go down to the minimum, cross through 0, go up to the max, and then go through 0. And then it will keep repeating. Min, 0, max, 0, min, 0, max, 0. And then for cosine, when a is greater than 0, we start at the max, then we cross through 0, go to the min, cross through 0, and end at the max. And then it can keep repeating. If a is less than 0, we'll start at the min, go through 0, go to the max, again cross through 0, and then end at the min. So I'm going to show you an example, and we're going to graph y equals 2 sine of 1/4 x. So we're going to go through and find out the amplitude and the period. So the amplitude is a, the absolute value of a, and a is just this 2. So it's going to be 2. Then to find the period, remember we do 2 pi divided by b, and our b is 1/4. So we're going to do 2 pi times 4. So the period is 8
So it goes
pi.
1 goes to 8.
Yeah, to 8 pi. So because we start, let's see, we have sine. I'm gonna back up here. 0 max, 0 min, 0. That's kind of dividing it into 4. Do you see that? 1, 2, 3, 4. So we actually need to take our 8 pi and divide it by 4. And that's what we want to label our x-axis. So the amplitude is 2, so we have to go up to 2 on the y-axis and to -2 because we need to get, our max will be 2 and our min will be -2. And we are going to label 2 pi, then 4 pi, 6 pi, and 8 pi. Then we're going to follow the pattern. So we start at 0. At 2 pi, we go to the max. We go through 0 at 4 pi, we do the min at 6 pi, and then we do 0 at 8 pi. So we have this sine function that looks like that.
Looks exactly the same.
Of course it does, but that's it's actually different because we labeled by 2 pi instead of by pi halves. You could label by pi halves and then it would just be like
So
stretched
if you
really big.
I was expecting it to look like
So I'm gonna end the lesson